Right, so here we have the profile, and it's rendering the user ID from the parameter. So we're able to extract the parameter, right, and render it on the page. What we'd like to be able to do is go fetch the user for that particular ID. So let's do that. For that, we're going to, anything that has to do with data access about users, we should immediately think there's a service for that, right? And certainly we had started doing that. What we'd like to be able to do is, given the ID of a user, return a particular instance of that user, right? So we can do something that looks very, very similar to this finder method. So find a user by ID, and we're going to pass the user ID. And again, it's going to iterate over the users and try to find the user by if the user.id matches the user ID, then we return that one user. Okay? So once we have that, from the profile controller, we can inject it. So let's import it first. So this will be a user service. Okay? And have it injected here in the constructor. We say private user service, which is of type user service. There it is. Okay, and let's put this in separate lines of code. There we have the user service. So what is it that we want to do? Now that we have the user ID, we can use it to find the user, right? We can say this.user, which we don't have. Let's create a user to render this. So user of type user. And do we have a user? It just imported it for me. It imported it directly because I had a dependency. Very good. Okay, I have user. There it is. We can import it and say use the user service to find me a user by its ID, and I'm going to pass it this user ID. Yes? Okay? And ideally, we could just render it in the template. So in the template, we could h2 render the user object. Right? So if we render, this doesn't quite, oh wait, there is no 456. There it is. It renders as an object. Okay, it renders as an object. We could render just user dot first name. Oh, do we have first names? Or do we do just? Oh, we just did usernames, right? Usernames. Okay. So there is Alice. Or if I log in as Bob, it'll be Bob or Charlie. Right? That makes sense? Right? Ideally, we would want to populate a form, right? That would allow us to edit this, right? So for instance, we might have an input field whose value, for instance, could be user.username, right? And then here for the first name, we don't have a first name. So there, we have Charlie, or we have Alice, or we have Bob. Okay. All right, that makes sense. All right. Okay, so let's now work on being able to perhaps update or manipulate this user. Okay, so let's work on that